All right, let's have some tough questions.
So I have many different conditions, which means that I have quite a
Hey,
handful.
I'll give you the microphone. We've got one.
Right here, we got one here and right here. So I have quite a handful of different conditions, which means that I have quite a few doctors, and not all of them understand fully about Li-Fraumeni and how we need to limit all the CTs they want to throw at me and the different X-rays and all the radiation. So how do you know when to say no when they just want to, throw a CT at me for something that's not even that serious? How do you know when to just say no?
So sometimes, even if you have LFS, you require radiation and you require CT. I think that's important, that it's not always wrong to do it, but I think if it's possible to use something without radiation to get the same result, then you should do something. Something different should be done. For example, an MRI if possible. And I think here it's important to really say no. If it's not an emergency, if there are alternatives, it's, in my eyes, it is important to, if this physician doesn't know about the risk, it's important to not to be polite, because being polite may be very risky for you. I would you need to be very strong and say no, right? I mean, because if you don't give consent, they can't do it.
I also think, Li-Fraumeni syndrome is obviously really rare. And, as doctors, we don't know everything there is to know about it, all the syndromes and things, and all the different disorders out there. There's plenty of disorders I've never heard of. And so when you go to, doctors around town a lot, as you guys have already experienced, don't know anything about Li-Fraumeni syndrome, or they have to Google it and try to figure out quickly what it's all about. So I think it's really important, you guys are in the know, you're here. It's important to always have an expert person, whether it's a genetic counselor or a geneticist or a medical oncologist, anybody that's just an expert in what's going on in Li-Fraumeni syndrome at your disposal. And we're at your disposal, so you can get our emails and whatever you guys need. So try to have at least someone, even if you're not seeing them regularly, just someone that if questions arise, you can at least email them and go from there.
Yeah, and that was exactly the point that I wanted to make. You need a quarterback. You need one person who is your kind of go-to person who can sometimes have those conversations with your other doctors for you. So you're not the one having to maybe challenge your doctor on the appropriateness of that CT scan. And that's something that we try to do in our clinic, kind of serve as that central place where we kind of can review everything that's going on and help try to minimize things. You've probably all had the experience too where one doctor says, oh, I want to see you again in 3 months, and the other doctor says, I want to see you in 4 months. And, could we not get that together and make one trip? So those are some of the things that we try to do for the patients in our clinic to just make coordinating and dealing with all those multiple providers a little bit easier.
One other advice that might be helpful is you can always politely say, or impolitely say, is there another way we can do this test? So CT scan, okay, but maybe can we do it without ultrasound, or with the ultrasound, without radiation, and here's why. Because, just like TJ said, a lot of people may not know what Li-Fraumeni syndrome is, and they don't even realize it. But if you explain to them, I'm not really supposed to get extra radiation, they say, oh, okay, well then let's just do the ultrasound, that's just as easy. So it's just being able to speak up, but again, like Wendy said, all of us here, TJ, we're all here to help you have those conversations.
Thank you.
Another question. This isn't really to do with LFS, but for the clinical geneticists and genetic counselors, I've been interested in possibly pursuing medical counseling myself, and I think genetics would be a great way to, or or something that I would be interested in. What was kind of the road for you to get into what you're doing now, and what all does your job encompass? What do you do?
So I will put in a plug for genetic counseling. It's an amazing profession. There are actually, it's a master's degree in the United States, so you would get your regular college, four-year college, and then you would apply to a graduate school, which is about a 2-year program. And it would consist of learning about genetics and science and biology. And then it would also talk to you about all the counseling skills. What's it like talking to people and working with people and helping them along the way? And then learning a lot about ordering genetic tests and drawing family trees and all the kinds of things that go into the appointments piece of it, and all the research opportunities and things that are also available. So it's a really nice, for me, it's a really nice blend of kind of science and teaching and, counseling, so it's been a really nice blend. A geneticist is someone who went to medical school and specialized in genetics, and can actually, see patients and do clinical exams. They can talk more about what they can do, but we work very closely together. That's one of the things I love about doing cancer genetics, is we work very closely with the people who work in cancer, the oncologists, but also the geneticists and other people on the team. And I have a sister with Down syndrome. That's how I got it.
So we all have our own stories of how we got there. So when I finished university, I went to study design. I didn't go to medical school. I didn't know what I wanted to do, actually. And only then I went to medical school. So if you want to be a geneticist, medical school is long. I know it's very long. But when you finish medical school, you'll have to go through another training, which is the clinical genetics. But then you will already be a doctor. So you will be already working on it. And I can say that it's the most amazing job in the world. I love doing what I do, and especially the contact you're able to have with your patients and the families. And it's fascinating to be able to do also the research. So if you want to do the research at the same time. So I did my PhD on molecular biology and oncology as well. So you're able to be in touch with both sides of the coin. I didn't think about going and working with research, but it was Li-Fraumeni who brought me to research. Within my first year of as a medical geneticist, I saw 35 patients with Li-Fraumeni in Brazil in my clinic. So my mentor said, well, that's not possible. There are only 200 in the world. How come you saw 35? And I said, no, I did. There was a diagnosis, and I was happy to present in a congress, a poster, and someone came and said, well, come and do your PhD with me. And it was how I got into research. So I think Li-Fraumeni chose me as well. And it's an amazing journey. And it's wonderful to be able to work so closely with the genetic counselors. They are really the soul of the team. They are the ones who really get the bond between the families and the physicians and the families together.
I thought it was well said. I don't really have
Doesn't
too
matter
much.
if you don't all discuss. Yeah, I think they gave a pretty good description of this, and it's great to hear of interest in this, and that's kind of what we were hoping by giving you exposure in the lab and some of these things that might give you some ideas of how you want to use your experience in the future.
Now, so Wendy, what are the numbers? How many genetic counselors are there, and how many do you need? So you'll have job security, right?
There's probably about 5,000 genetic counselors now, I would say, and they estimate that need is that we're gonna need 2 to 3 times that to actually meet the need as genetics is becoming part of so many areas of health
around the world. And that's in the States.
That's just in the States,
Yeah.
And to put that in perspective, I mean, how many clinical geneticists work in this field? 10?
Yeah, and for sure, as a clinical geneticist, you would have a lot of work.
So in Germany, there are no genetic counselors. So everything is done by the geneticists. So and I think that would be awesome to have genetic counselors. So.
And the same in Brazil. We have 189 geneticists, clinical geneticists, and 0 genetic counselors. So to have a whole country on our side.
So in Germany, there are 50 centers taking care of patients with cancer, and each center has like a big staff. But sometimes it's not good to have too many, because if you have too many for a rare disease, sometimes it would be better to only have one, because they know a lot. So, for example, in Holland, they decided to close down all the 5 centers, and everyone was going only into one center. And this center is going to be the strongest center in Europe because they see so many patients. They have 600 new diagnoses. And so sometimes having a lot of centers is not a good thing. But in Utrecht. So it's just changing. Right now they still have the other centers, but they're closing down the other centers, and everyone is going to the Princess Maxima in Utrecht.
Yes.
I wanted to ask more like the actual genetics point of view, because I was talking to my oncologist and he showed me where my mutation was on the gene, and I was just wondering if there's any relation with where your mutation is on your gene, and I don't know what does it mean if like if you're going to get a specific cancer, or if it's going to come at a certain point in your life, because he wasn't really able to give me more specifics.
Yeah, that's a great question, because that's everything that we are asking ourselves as scientists. Yeah, we know there are specific mutations that tend to have later onset of cancers, and maybe a smaller risk for men, for instance, like the Brazilian mutation. We know also that certain mutations may have a little more risk than the others, but for the moment it's very hard for us to tell if you have a germline mutation which cancer you'll have, or if you're having any cancer at all. So I think the main goal right now is to try to really start screening as early as possible and to keep you under screening regularly and the best way possible. So as Wendy said previously, you have to have that central person who you talk to and who you refer to. Maybe you're not enrolled in a project. We have several projects around the world. And the good thing is that we all talk to each other. We're constantly connecting. Like on Monday, we have a meeting where we have the LIFE Consortium, which stands for Li-Fraumeni Exploratory Consortium. And we talk about you, and we talk about the findings we have, and we try to unite, because we cannot work alone. So just to try to answer you, we don't know it for now, but we're trying very, very hard to find. Maybe.
So the answer is yes, but we don't know. And Dr. Malkin, who we mentioned before, and many others of our colleagues are trying to understand, are there other parts of the DNA, so not just in the p53 gene, but are there other parts of our genome that can help predict? Because maybe certain people with LFS only need to be screened once every 5 years, or maybe every 6 months. And so until we have that answer, we still go with the same protocols. One thing that's interesting that I thought to mention, you may not notice, one of our colleagues, and a few of us have noticed this, is yes, your risk as patients with LFS is much, much higher than the general population. But did you know, it looks like once people with LFS get to the ages of 60, 70, 80 years old, their risk for cancer is lower than the general population. And we're trying to figure out why that is, and what does it have to do with inflammation and infections. It's just an interesting Interesting tidbit to just take that home with you.
Okay, so like, when did each of you learn about LFS, and like, how did you get interested in it, I guess, my question.
I'll start because I'm holding the microphone. It's a little bit embarrassing, but we've been together long enough that I can share it with you now. So, for whatever reason, I was able to get through pre-med, med school, internship, residency, chief residency, never ever hearing the word or knowing about Li-Fraumeni syndrome. It wasn't until I met Danielle, who I showed you again, I was on call that weekend, and I turned to the attending physician, this is a first year fellowship, and I said, oh, you know, this little girl, she has leukemia, brain tumor, her dad has brain, and he said to me, oh, this sounds like Li-Fraumeni syndrome. And I said, in my head, Li-Fra what? But out loud I said, oh yeah, absolutely, that's what it sounded like to me too. And luckily Google had just popped on the scene, so I could Google it. Oh yeah, that does sound like Li-Fra. So that's how I first learned about Li-Fraumeni syndrome. But now I'm in the center of this little, symposium here. So that's what. So that wasn't so long, it was about 15 years ago. But then, obviously, became very interested in it, and you heard the story and you know about it. So that's my. So I learned from my patient when she was first diagnosed. So it was from the family history that I learned about LFS.
Tough question. I had finished medical school, finished internal medicine residency, and then had just accepted a medical oncology fellowship when the questionnaire became ill. And so diagnosed with a cancer, and then sort of thrust into the, you're a doctor, you should know a lot of these things, but leading up to that, probably experienced similar situations that many of the folks in the LFS community have felt, that there's nothing wrong, you're healthy. And so having the continual question to actually get a diagnosis, and then once that diagnosis was made, to try and figure out how to do the right thing, and really who to listen to when there's really conflicting evidence regarding treatments, including radiation, chemotherapies, and whatnot. And so that's really how I became involved. And then for the first few years afterwards, was sort of searching and felt like there was no guidance or no sort of way forward, and that's when the 2010 conference that was set up at the NCI and NIH, where the LFSA was first formed. And then Jen and some of Jen's family, we all got together to form this organization. So, and it's been, I believe, a very, very positive thing. This weekend, a perfect example.
Well, about 25 years ago, I moved to Boston, and I was a genetic counselor. I worked in prenatal genetics, never worked in cancer genetics, but I needed a job. And this doctor that I interviewed with said, you know, we just found this gene. It's one of the first cancer genes we've ever found. And we need to go back and let our families know that we found this. And we would love to have a genetic counselor help us. And that doctor's name was Frederick Lee. He was my boss for many, many years. He started at the NIH with Dr. Fraumeni and then came to the Dana-Farber and ran the program. And we didn't know how families were going to respond to this. And some of them were very excited and interested in information, and others were really afraid and didn't necessarily want to look into it more. So it's been a learning experience. I think over those 25 years, we have a lot more we can offer now to help keep people safe who are found to have this gene, which has been an exciting journey. But that's how I learned about LFS.
So for me, as a pediatrician, I always wanted to become an oncologist, because I think oncologists really can make a difference because patients are so sick. And at the same time, it is so unfair. I mean, if you develop cancer with 70 and you smoked a lot of cigars or cigarettes and you drank a lot of alcohol, you have an explanation. But if you develop cancer as a 3-year-old or as a 2-year-old, I mean, it's so unfair. So I was also very interested in investigating the causes of cancer, and therefore I became so interested in that topic and read a lot about it, and had in my practice also patients that I took care of, and that's how I became involved in that field.
My story was a little bit like Kathy's. When my first job as a genetic counselor was at MD Anderson in Houston, and I got to work with Dr. Louise Strong. I don't know if any of you guys have gotten to work with her, but she has been working in this field for a very long time, and she had the same situation. She had done a lot of research and done TP53 testing on families and wanted to figure out how to give them that information back. And so she asked me to help her make a video that we were going to send to families to help them decide if they wanted to maybe come in and learn their test results. So this was in the mid-90s. I don't know how many of you guys have looked back at like some pictures of your parents, maybe before they had you. The mid-90s was a time where we were making interesting decisions about hairstyles and clothes, and all of mine are now immortalized in this video forever, which my only hope is that it was made on a VCR tape, and my hope is that eventually none of those will exist, and no one will ever be able to see this video again, but that was how I got to start learning about this and meeting these families and getting to work with them.
Now I want to see that video. Play that video for the next workshop.
That's the first thing we're going to show them.
Yeah, I was a little slow to warm up. So I started. I did my fellowship in Cleveland at Case Western Reserve, and so my mentor there was Georgia Wiesner, who was a big cancer geneticist, and I loved cancer genetics. I thought it was really interesting, and just to make a diagnosis, and so you could track it through the family and do things like that. But I really didn't start getting more into it until 2011. So Josh was an author on this paper. There was a paper that came out, Dr. Malkin's group and Balani, who some of you guys have know that name and that paper, in Lancet, and it really showed that you can actually do something for these people. Because before that, we were just saying, okay, well, best of luck to you. You can do prenatal screening, for your family members now, and try to maybe keep out of future generations, but there's not much we can do, and nothing's been proven to work and things like that. So that's when I started getting a little bit more interested. And then when I came to City of Hope, really to keep furthering that, that's where I saw there was a major need, and let's start screening these people and patients and trying to help them. And really it was kind of like if you build it, they'll come. At the same time, one of the big protocols that was going on at the NIH shut down, so a lot of patients started coming our way. So it's just been really building it, and then at the same time we have all this research going on with Li-Fraumeni syndrome there. So it's just been a really exciting journey. It's still ramping up.
So I already started talking a little bit about my story on Li-Fraumeni, but so I think I was really, really lucky because after that, people started to believe in me, that really we had something different in Brazil, and I was able to have one of my patients come to my office and say, well, maybe if you want to come to our hometown, you'll be able to meet some of my family members. And I said, okay, so let's do it. And she said, okay, come like next week and we'll meet in my grandmother's house. So I arrived there, and there were 25 family members from the same family, and we were only 3 of us, and we said, well, we have to invent a way of counseling them. We have so many people here in the kitchen. We all sat down in the kitchen, and I started talking about Li-Fraumeni. What was Li-Fraumeni? And what was the genetic testing? And why would they benefit from the genetic testing? So most of them wanted to do it. So we were prepared, and we collected blood from those people. And we came back and we started doing the testing. So the following week, they call me and they say, well, I think there are more people from my family who want to come. And I said, okay, so let's schedule an appointment, I don't know, in 15 days. I said, okay, how many can we be? And I said, well, as many as you want. So I was expecting like another 20. Well, the day of the meeting, they arrived in a bus, a full bus, and 2 vans. It happened that one of the people within the family was the mayor, so he was able to get everybody organized. So that was the beginning of the largest pedigree we know of Li-Fraumeni syndrome. And from that story and from talking to that grandmother who told me, well, maybe it was my great-great-great-grandfather who was a tropeiro, which is like a historical figure who used to go down and stop every 30 kilometers in Brazil, bringing goods and families and maybe leaving families also on that trail. That's how Li-Fraumeni spread in Brazil. So we were able really to get to the historical part as well and to get in touch with all those families. And then I did really, with my group of students and researchers and someone who came from France who works in the World Health Organization, to try to trace really what happened in Brazil. And I think I'll work my whole life with Li-Fraumeni.
You guys are hopefully picking up the Marines, but she's famous. She's a really important person in the world. Me, you. But I'm trying to remember, you figured out in Brazil, in certain places in Brazil, all cancers, pediatric and all cancers, one out of how many are due to LFS?
We're not able to.
You're not the same, but it's a lot.
It's a lot.
It's a lot. And is the blood spot screening still going on, or?
So, yeah. So,
well, the hard thing in Brazil is that there are many people who are not able at all to have care. So we were able to get from the government the possibility of doing even the whole body MRI to our Li-Fraumeni patients, what was amazing. And patients who, they all joined this group. We had 0 funds for the research, so it was like almost magic, but it worked. And the newborn screening was the possibility of getting from the government the right to test every single blood spot from Brazil from the year of 2014 to try to really see in the entire country who are the people who have Li-Fraumeni and what are the states where the syndrome is really frequent. So this is ongoing. We don't have the results yet.
My dream is to do something similar in the United States. So every time a baby is born, we do a blood test on that baby to see if they have any genetic diseases. And we're screening for things that only occur maybe 1 in 15,000, or 1 in 10,000, like PKU, which is a metabolic syndrome. Because we know with certain genetic diseases, if you can find it early, you can help improve the life of that child. My bias is that Li-Fraumeni syndrome occurs 1 in 1,000. I told you that already. Well, we don't know if that's actually the true number, but 1 in 5,000, I think people would accept that number. And we have data, and you saw it today, that if you know someone has Li-Fraumeni syndrome early and you do the screening, you can definitely change their outcome and improve their life. So I think if we're screening for things 1 in 10,000, some we screen for 1 in a million, like skin. It really only occurs 1 in a million. And if Li-Fraumeni is as common as 1 in 5,000 or 1 in 1,000, then we should be screening for it. One thing, I just wanted to add a story about the screening protocol, just for you guys, and you might appreciate this. And now it's pretty routine to talk about surveillance and screening. But 10 years ago, when we started doing this, and I would go to my colleagues, and I would say, we need to screen all our patients with Li-Fraumeni syndrome. Well, how do you want to screen them? So, I don't know. Let's do a whole body MRI. That's what Dr. Malcolm does. There's other people. Oh, that's crazy. Well, let's at least do a brain MRI. And so, why do you want to do a brain MRI? And I said, well, because we can find a brain tumor early. And you know what they said? They said, John, these are neurosurgeons. I won't say their names or where they were from, Stanford. But they said, scratch that. But they said to me, Josh, there's no evidence that finding a brain tumor early will change the outcome for the patient. So why should we screen? And I looked at them, And I said, for dramatic effect, I'll look in the camera. I said, but there's no evidence if you don't look that they'll change outcome, right? So yeah, there's no evidence it works, but there's no evidence it doesn't work. So let's do the study and find out. And we did, and now hopefully many of you are getting brain scans on a regular basis, as well as your other whole body MRI. And the reason I want to tell that story is because it's been a challenge, and we've made tremendous progress because of everyone on this panel working hard. And this is, again, comes back to advocating for yourself and us advocating for our patients, because you are a small group of people, but we know and we believe if we work hard enough that the research is going to save your lives. And so that's what we're doing.
There was a question for you.
Yeah.
What you just said was.
Can you use the microphone?
What you just said was very much related to the question I wanted to ask, because we have heard a lot about surveillance and protocols, and this is of course very good for those who know that they do have Li-Fraumeni syndrome, but still there are about 25% who do not know that they have it. So you said it's your dream to get every baby tested directly after birth, but what is realistic, or how is it now? What can be done now to find out earlier that somebody is a dealable case? Just going back to the genetic counselor need that we have nowadays, I think you all got the diagnosis of Li-Fraumeni within a certain situation. The ideal situation is to have a genetic counselor telling you this result, or a geneticist, because this person will be able to not only to explain what the syndrome is, but to prepare you on how to deal with it as well. And when you do screening on a large population, you have to really be aware that not everybody will get this information the same way. Sometimes it's really hard to deal with a result, and you don't know what to expect from the person who receives a diagnosis that there is Li-Fraumeni in the family. Sometimes they get really nervous, sometimes they don't want to hear about it, sometimes they want to immediately start screening, but the genetic counselor will prepare. So if we ever get to this situation where we have every single person who was born to receive this, we need also a massive education, not only of the population, but of medical doctors, and so that the person who receives this information knows how to deal with this information as well, which is not always very simple. And here we have an ideal situation with all you. You're amazingly brave to be here today, because we know you all went through a lot. You all went in the family or with yourselves, and you have the capacity of sharing with other people who are at your own age and maybe have Li-Fraumeni, and give them the strength to go ahead and pursue. Sometimes even the parents who are here today to share with other parents. We have in our clinics patients who don't want to get their children tested for various reasons. They can be afraid, or they're just denying, or others are saying, well, maybe my child will never get a life insurance. And you can have any kind of different reason why not to test, but here you're able to really pass it on, how important it is to get tested and to get all the screening needed for all those who are at risk. So you're really getting empowered here today, and to bring it on to everybody you know who might be at risk.
Sorry, but the question was more about those who do not know that they are at risk.
And I think, barring testing all newborns, you all are on the front lines, and I think that patients underestimate the impact that they've had on the people that take care of them. And so I'm sure you've all educated your physicians, who have then gone to their colleagues, and there are a number of patients who have had the diagnosis made because of another patient with Li-Fraumeni and their efforts. So it's part of the efforts of LFSA to disseminate that information and brochures and we'd love if you would help us with that message. So.
And it's important to know family history as well, because if you have a family history of people who have had cancer or any other disease where there's more than one person in the family with it, just to bring that up to your doctor, to get a referral, to start the conversations, that's helpful.
But to answer the question of the novel case, there's no way to make a diagnosis without screening. I mean, you cannot make so there it's a bad situation because then you run into your first cancer in order to make the diagnosis, and even there you often don't fit the criteria for testing. That even then you can miss it easily. But in the richer countries, right now there's a lot of sequencing going on, and I think soon it will come, the situation will come that all cancers are being sequenced entirely, and parallel blood is going to be sequenced. I think it's only a question of a matter of a few months or years that it will start, at least in the richer countries, and I think this will help. That at least if you develop a cancer, that you will immediately know whether it's Li-Fraumeni associated or not. I think this will come soon. But knowing it in a de novo case, prior to the cancer, the only way is screening. There's no alternative.
I was just going to say too, being that advocate for your family is huge. So, you guys know you have it, it's in the family. Trying to trace back to these distant cousins and things like that, just so to spread the word amongst your own families. I mean, think about how many thousands of family members are represented by the people sitting in the room right now. And there's, I'm sure, a lot of people in many of your families that, that are distant to you guys, that have no idea that this is going on one big part of the family tree. And so getting that information back to those family members is huge. And that's where, unfortunately, we kind of break down. We need better programs like what, he showed before about, where you can send emails to your family members. So there's a real need for tools like that so that we as doctors can work with you guys and counselors to really spread that throughout the family. I mean, truthfully, if you, besides the de novo cases, if we did a really good job, we would capture a lot of people in the U.S. without even needing to do newborn screening, although that would be obviously the creme de la creme.
So before we run out of time, I want to take the panel prerogative and I want to ask you a question. Teenagers, the youth. So the reason that we had this conference, one of the reasons, right, it's great to bring everyone together. And when Jen mentioned it and Rob mentioned it, I said, oh my God, that's a great idea because, as teenagers, sometimes you get overlooked, right? The little babies with LFS, oh, we gotta focus on the babies. And then the grown-ups, all grown-ups want to talk about themselves. But you guys, you're kind of in the middle. And so my question for you is, and again, this is so we can hear it and bring it back to the other members of the LFS community. We've got this call on Monday also, some of the other researchers, is what are you most scared about having LFS? And, or, what is it that we can do to help you the most as young adults with a whole life ahead of you living with LFS?
I'm most scared about my children having LFS and having to suffer a similar way that I had to. I consider myself a psychologically strong person and I was able to endure much, but my children might not be the same in the future and they might get depression or something from having to suffer from a tumor like I did, and I'm afraid of that. I don't want a life like that for my children.
say, hearing a lot of different stories here, I'm very fortunate to have the protocol that they have in Toronto, but there's a lot of kids here that, and adults that don't get that protocol. And for some to be so fortunate and others not so, it's just not right and it doesn't settle well with me. For those who don't have protocol that they need, I can only imagine how much more so. That's something else to care about at the moment.
I'm just slightly scared if I get through the cancer that I'm currently in, that I've got a higher possibility that I could get this cancer again, or like obviously another part of my body. But I'm scared that I'm much more like prone to getting another cancer. And also, I'm 15, so I'm half through my GCSEs in London, and I've already told you about it. But I'm struggling to like catch up with my other students. For example, in media, all my friends have finished their coursework, whereas I'm only on the second piece, so I'm having to catch up, but there's no one really there helping me like get through that.
I think the most helpful thing that our medical team can do is to help us achieve our own goals as well as our medical goals, because that's what my oncology team was able to do for me, and it made everything so much smoother because I had to leave college for a whole month and somehow get my coursework and work and get a surgery not too late so that I wouldn't have to redo the semester. And my team just really, they really just did everything that they could to secure surgery and get everything done so quickly so that I could just go back to my regular life. And they just really understood that it was very important for me to continue studying and not to have to lose a whole semester. So that made the whole experience a lot easier.
I think it's really helpful as like a teenager to have your doctors tell you like what you can do as an individual to help them in terms of like knowing your body and when something is wrong and kind of feeling for stuff. And so obviously the say do something, and I think like your doctor's showing you like what to do, giving yourself a checkup is really nice.
Boys in the back.
Are there things, again, as teenagers, are there things that and giving us advice, right? Because we take care of the patient. Like you, we're on the front lines, right? And we see new teenagers that we diagnose and talk to with Li-Fraumeni syndrome. Are there certain things that we should be talking about or should not be talking about? Should we be kicking the parents out of the room and be having private conversations about things, or is it better to have them in the room? We're looking for advice from you about how we can be better doctors for youth with LFS.
Yeah, I spoke to my doctor, and my doctor said you can have a chance to have breast cancer, and that's really high, the risk. So he said, yeah, maybe you can remove the breasts. I was thinking, like, removing them already, I'm so young, and it's kind of a woman thing, so how do you think about that idea?
Are you're asking us to answer that now? I was just...
Yeah, about the idea to remove it all, remove your breast so young, at a young age, to avoid the cancer.
So we don't want to get into too many details of giving medical advice now, because it's being recorded. We don't want to take it out of context. Wendy and I often say, it's a personal. As a teenager, no. Anyone under 20, no. That would be my advice. I mean, everybody's a little different, and if you have a history of breast cancer, or if you yourself have had breast cancer, every situation is a little bit general, but different. But in general, I would say if you are a teenager with Li-Fraumeni syndrome, you should not have a mastectomy as a teenager. When you get into the 20s and 30s, again, it becomes a personal choice. There's not a right answer and there's not a wrong answer. And so if a woman doesn't want to have a mastectomy, that makes a lot of sense, and that's totally fine as long as they're following the protocol. If there are individual reasons that makes that woman want to decide to have a mastectomy, then if there's enough discussion and it's an educated choice, it's something that can be done. But in the recommendations, we don't say, have a mastectomy. And then Wendy, if you, I always get a little nervous talking about this, I don't want to give the wrong advice, but Wendy or Kat, I don't know if you want to follow up or if you have more to say on that. Do you agree? Wendy taught me well.
I think that's exactly right. I think that's exactly right, that it's not anything that you would be expected to act on anytime soon. And if you are going to do any kind of action like that, it has to do with whether you want to have children first and nurse them and do all these other things first. There's no urgency to that, and there's a lot of conversations with a lot of different people before you would do anything like that.
I'll say, just because this topic
comes up all the time, right? So you're not the first person to ask us this question. That's how we have the answers prepared. We had one woman that we take care of, young. She was in her 20s, I don't remember exactly what age, but she had been having a lot of biopsies because they did the breast screening. They said, oh, well, there's something there, we don't know what it is, we need to do a biopsy. Oh, it's nothing, you're fine, it's not cancer. And then 6 months later, or a year later, oh, we see something, we need to do a biopsy. And every time she had a biopsy, it's just the way her body was, that she kept having things pop up that weren't cancer but looked like they could be. The biopsies were very painful, they were complicated, it was full of anxiety for her because every time she said, oh no, this is it. This is breast cancer. This is, I think her mother had died of breast cancer. So this is my breast cancer. So even though she was still relatively young, she was less than, I don't remember what age she, 21, yeah, so still relatively young. She talked to us and she said, I'm so nervous about this. Every time it happens, it's so painful. If I just have a mastectomy, maybe I don't have to worry about it anymore. And so because we had an educated conversation with her, we said, yeah, we can support that and we understand it. Our job is to educate you so you can make informed decisions. And so it was an informed decision. She knew she didn't have to do it, but she wanted to, and so we could support that. And now she has less anxiety. I will also say on the flip side, as some of us know, that you can still have a mastectomy and you can still get breast cancer. Because there's still breast tissue. Now, lowers the risk a lot because most of the breasts are removed, but there's still tissue there. So it's not 100%, so that's also something to consider. So we're not giving you an answer for you, but we're just sort of saying in general. I love you. More questions, hard questions. Keep coming.
I think something else that would be helpful, I don't know, maybe for me personally it might be different for other teams, but when making that transition from having your parents take you through medical appointments and medical information, talking to your healthcare providers, to us as growing into adults, having to take that on, I don't know, it might be a good idea not to just talk with your parents, but maybe to your parents and your oncologist and your pediatrician, and see what they have to say and say, this is what you will have to do. And have a conversation moving forward so that you can feel confident transitioning into an adult life, what you need to do specifically, because there's kind of a broad discussion of it this morning, but make that conversation with your oncologist and with your healthcare providers, what specifically you need to do in order to advocate for yourself and to get the care that you need.
Once I heard that contraceptive pills are not recommended for people with LFS, and are hormones more harmful for us?
Someone else? So you're talking about birth control pills? Or, yeah.
I mean, all kinds of hormones.
All kinds of hormones, yeah. So Dr. Garber and Kathy were, she gets this question a lot. We always defer to her because she's the not that Dr. Garber has more hormones than the rest of us, she has a lot of experience. She may, I don't know. But she still has a lot of experience dealing with patients on birth control and hormone-related cancer. So a lot of questions we get with LFS, we don't know the answers to. So we have to take our sort of our best guess. And we know that everyone with LFS, everyone sitting in this room, you guys are much closer to getting cancer than everyone else. It doesn't mean you will get cancer, it means you're much closer. We know that some cancers develop after a patient or person, regardless of LFS, gets exposed to hormones. So if you get super physiologic, meaning higher doses than you normally get of a hormone, that will, in some cases, increase a cancer risk. And so it's a little bit of convoluted logic, but if people with LFS are closer to getting cancer, if hormones in some situation can cause cancer, then people who are closer to getting cancer should probably avoid things that can tip them over the edge. Doesn't mean if you take birth control pills or you receive hormones that you're definitely going to get cancer. So no one's done a study, right? So this is what we were talking about, right? This is why we need groups to come together so we can look at every person with LFS who's ever taken hormones and actually answer that question. So because we don't know the answer in the field, what we tend to say to patients is, look, some situations you need hormones medically and the benefit outweighs the risks, but we try to find the hormones that are more closely related to the normal levels. So the question often comes up with birth control. And I'm not going to go, why is someone taking birth control? I'm not recommending, I'm not going to touch that today. That's a different workshop for a different day that I will not be at. Okay, that's for something else. But in terms of someone taking birth control pills, what we say, there are different formulations. Some, and this is true for all medicines, some medicines have really, really, really high levels of hormones that we know increase the risk of cancer. Other formulations of birth control pills have much lower levels. They still do the job of what that medicine is supposed to do, but it's closer to the normal levels. So we always try to, this means I shouldn't be talking about this subject. No, it means that we try to actually find those hormone levels that are closest to normal. I don't know if any of my other colleagues have comments.
Yeah, I think that's all. And there's some things that, from the literature. So, like older women that have gone through menopause. So when I was in medical school, every single woman who was after menopause was on hormone replacement therapy. So that's when you're 50 years old, you're done, your ovaries aren't putting out any more estrogen. That was just extremely common. Everybody was on it. And then this big study came out saying, oh, this might actually increase women's risk for breast cancer. And so all of a sudden, nobody was on it. It was within, about 1 year, everybody was on it, then no one was on it. And now people are starting to come back on it here and there. And I think the consent, at least my personal opinion would be, if you happen to still have your breast when you're older with Li-Fraumeni syndrome as a woman and you've gone through menopause, yes, taking hormone replacement therapy, probably not the best idea because that's what he's getting at. You're getting hormones then when your body shouldn't be producing hormones. So you're giving yourself more hormones than you would have had otherwise. I don't know, the verdict is really out, I think, on the oral contraceptives, because that's a bit different, because those hormones are actually lower levels than your body would be producing naturally. So you give a low dose of that, and it just kind of shuts down your ovaries. So who knows? So we definitely need research, like you said, and you guys are a great group to do these kind of studies.
And not to labor this point on this one question, but we actually have a lot of data from other high-risk conditions. And for genetic conditions for which women are actually at much higher risk for breast cancer, even than Li-Fraumeni syndrome. And we don't generally see that birth control pills are significantly affecting that risk because, just like you were saying, we're not really, for young women, we're not really giving them more hormones. We're more adjusting the hormones that their body is producing naturally. And in fact, we see that using birth control pills can actually significantly lower the risks for other types of cancer, like cancer of the uterus, cancer of the ovaries. When we say hormones, there are times where hormones are problematic, when we're giving things that at times in our life when we wouldn't normally be exposed to them. But that doesn't mean that all hormones are bad. And so that tends to be something that we hear a lot, that because people are predisposed to cancer, they're told that they can't have anything with hormones. That's always going to be a bad thing, and that's really not, not the case. And it'll be great when we have a lot more data on this, but we do have data from other groups that we can extrapolate from, and we generally feel pretty confident that if a patient needs to use oral contraceptives, say that that's contraindicated because they've got Li-Fraumeni syndrome.
And this isn't just for the women out there. So, guys, maybe one day I'll be on testosterone. I don't know. Who knows? So, but yeah, I don't need it. I clearly make more than enough. You can see the beard. But this is something too for men. As going forward, yeah, it's probably not the best idea for a man that's just wants to keep up with the younger guys with Li-Fraumeni syndrome to go on some sort of testosterone replacement, similar to a woman that's gone through menopause when the hormone levels are starting to drop off. So it really just gets back to that. Don't overwork the system.
Yeah, I think all these questions on the reproductive part and everything, they'll come more and more to all of you, especially like you mentioned about your kids, your concern on how they will deal with it. There are strategies, there are ways of having children without the mutation. You have brain implantation diagnosis, and science is moving. So I think the main thing is that for all of you, whenever you have concerns that you don't want to talk in front of your parents or something, we're very quick to learn from you when you say, well, I just want 5 minutes with you. You can ask us to have a conversation on the side if you have specific questions on this, and we're ready to answer them. And for the breast cancer and for mastectomy, there are several sites where you can enter, and they'll show you how a breast will look after a risk-reducing mastectomy. There are several possibilities, and LFSA soon will be displaying a specific part of their site just for you to have. It's a wonderful site where you can you log in, you're able to see how it was before and how it's after the surgery, just for you to get prepared with the idea, but that's on the long run, it's not now for you.
And my hope would be after this weekend together, now that you know that there are resources for you, right? I mean, we were talking about testosterone hormones. I mentioned some of the growth hormones are something that doctors prescribe. And if you have concerns right now, there's this LFSA organization out there where you can ask questions. Now, of course, disclaimer, Rob is not your doctor, but we can try to find someone close to you or help you if you do have a question. And my hope is that you guys now look out and you recognize you're not the only one going through this, and that you have friends, peers, colleagues, other teenagers that you can turn to. Did you ever have this question come? I feel weird about asking, but have you ever seen this or done this, or has this happened to you? And now you have people who can hopefully respond and answer and help. In the back.
Yeah, I got a question that's kind of related with respect to cancer-causing viruses and the vaccinations, specifically HPV. And we understand this is really a good thing that's become recently available. However, nobody can answer the question, as far as I know, if HPV vaccination is something that be recommended for somebody with LFS. I was wondering if there's been any discussion on that with people that know about LFS.
Well, I don't think there's been a specific HPV vaccine LFS study, but we would recommend whether you have LFS or not, in the medical community, that everyone get the HPV vaccine, both boys and girls, and that it's a vaccine, so it's not a live, active virus, and so there's no risk to the vaccine. There's only a benefit. And again, there are many HPV-related cancers, and more as we're learning more about it, so that the vaccine would be a good idea. It's just we have other doctors on the
panel, I don't know.
Nothing to add.
Yeah.
I mean, having LFS doesn't prevent you from getting other cancers that are prevalent in the population in certain age groups, including cervical cancer. So I would agree.
And there's no contraindication.
Okay, or one or two, yeah, two more then. Yeah.
I just had a question regarding seizures. Have you noticed any increase with seizures in LFS?
I have not, but.
Could you repeat the question?
So the question was about seizures in cancer. You probably have one of the larger cohorts in the age.
No, not really.
So,
Oh, Christian.
yeah. Seizure should always prompt MRI because then you need to look for a tumor. But we all are not aware of this association of like seizures with LFS. But if you get a seizure, you should rule out a brain tumor. I think that would be important.
I'm thinking my nephew he's now LFS positive, but started, I guess, a grand mal seizure at the age of 9, and he's continued it. He's not in balance, and he's since had brain surgery, and it's not helped in any way. He's got an implant, that's not helped. But now the diagnosis of LFS. So nobody seems to know if did one come before the other. Obviously, he was born with LFS. So not knowing, at least in Canada, if there's a correlation.
There are some rare individuals who have a deletion of p53, but not only p53, but also additional genes, and this can cause like additional things, potentially including also seizures, but that's extremely rare. And I mean, there are also extremely rare patients who have two conditions. So you, having LFS doesn't prevent you from getting another condition. So.
Two more, and then we'll wrap it.
This is the most important, so.
Yeah, okay. We got permission, so it's okay.
Who's good?
Here we go.
So, just wondering if there's any statistics on the number of people who are diagnosed with LFS who never go on to get a cancer.
Yeah, so statistics on patients with LFS who never go on to develop cancer. There's a lot of selection bias, meaning the people who come in and get diagnosed with LFS often, not always, but often have cancer. That's why we think the cancer rates are so high. But as we're testing more and more people, we're learning not everyone with a p53 mutation will get cancer. So I don't know if you have, maybe you have a
little bit. Like we just had a publication, part of a consortium, where we looked at 26,000 controls in a big health, kind of non-cancer related database. And yeah, TP53 mutations are incredibly rare. I mean, they were 0.2% in that database. So if if you're not looking at a cancer database, it is very rare in general to have TP53 mutations. But like Josh said, we don't have good data on all this and on what we call the prevalence of developing cancer. Theoretically, it will get washed out a little bit, as we're finding more people, because we're doing all kinds of different testing. We're doing tumor testing now, where we're going to pick people up and families up that wouldn't have met the original criteria. We know that plenty of families don't meet the criteria already that we've classically used to try to identify families with Li-Fraumeni syndrome. So we know the spectrum is much wider, and so that's why it's important to to try to get involved. I know we brought it up a bunch of times in the research in general. Registries. There's multiple family registries throughout the U.S. That you can get involved in, and a lot of times we pull all that data together for various projects, and that's how we come up with these numbers.
But at the moment, there are no numbers.
There's one French study, but they only looked at the classic mutations. There are now new mutations coming up. We don't know that, but the classic mutations, the risk is 40% by age 18. So so when when you get older, it's approaching 100%, but also in the general population, the risk for old people is also very high, as I mentioned earlier. But if you have a classic mutation of P53, there was a study from Fribourg in France, 40% by age 18.
I think the other thing that we don't know is modifiers and siblings or family members affected, and why one gets pediatric cancer at 3 and the other one gets breast cancer in the 30s. And so there's just so much to be learned.
It's not 100%. We've seen people who, in families, it's rare, but we've seen people who haven't had cancer, who have P53. Not on it. So it's hard to answer that question.
And I think what's changing now with this protocol is that we're seeing more and more people arrive in their 70s healthy. Even if they had cancer, it was diagnosed early, we were able to catch it before the person even needed chemotherapy or radiotherapy. So the number of people who are aging well, even though they develop cancer and who have Li-Fraumeni, is getting very big.
How's that for a non-answer? All right, the last question.
We've heard lots about protocols and surveillance and screening, and Anna Joy mentioned it earlier that's become apparent amongst the teams.
Sorry, we're gonna have you repeat all that on the microphone, just so we can hear
it. Over the weekend, there's been lots of talk about protocols and surveillance and screening. And earlier, Anna Joy mentioned about it's become apparent amongst the teams in their conversations that there's different protocols that different countries follow, and also the adults have had the same conversations. And I just wondered why it does vary so much, the different protocols in the different countries, when looking up at the screen of global researchers that there are with a global community here. Why is the protocol so different in the various different countries? Why is there not a global protocol?
I'm going to hand this back to the question. As our European representative.
There's probably many ways to do it, and I think it's good to have one protocol that makes it easier, and that's why we met last October, and many of the people here were part of that discussion in Boston. That was organized by the American Association for Cancer Research, and we took all the different protocols and wrote up one. But this is brand new. This just came out a couple of weeks ago, and so exactly for the same reason. So we used to have multiple protocols, and none of them was like the right one. But it is helpful to have one consensus. We call it consensus, and now we have that. And this is very similar to the Toronto protocol because they have the advantage that they already have publications on it, and they were able to show that it's effective. Therefore, that chose a protocol that is very similar to that. What we did, we took out a number of things that were not so necessary. For example, for if you the adrenocortical cancer, which is very dangerous, you can pick it up by ultrasound. So you don't need a blood draw in order to look for the markers if you see it. So right now, so therefore we took that out. So we modified the protocol. The new one is slightly modified, therefore to make it more pleasant for the patients. But now we have that. Actually, this international protocol and physicians from and researchers from multiple countries were involved in that.
Can I just also want to, just so you know, it is on the website, on our website, and it was on Facebook. We had a post on Facebook, so it came out in June of 2017. So it is also listed under NORD. Now that LFSA is a member of NORD, so we're trying to keep as updated as we can on everything. They're doing a wonderful job doing that for us. So if you're ever curious about some of those things, we can also help with that. But it is listed on there on our website.
The reason I'm asking about it as well, because the day before I flew out here from the UK, I was in having my blood test ready to be tested. Addie's my daughter, and she was told that she had LFS in June. But I got told that following my results, my other daughter could be tested, but they would only screen her from the age of 20 for breast screening, and she's 17. So would I want her
be put through that emotional roller coaster when all they could offer her was screening from the age of 20. And that's the UK saying that to me.
So again, we don't want to get too much detail on personal cases up here, but we can talk about. But you're saying is there would be no screening until the age of 20.
And I was told it was only breast screening they would offer.
And only breast screening after. Yeah. So I mean.
This is the UK.
This is the UK. So we have these protocols that we recommend, and they started. So we wouldn't necessarily agree with that. If you want to respond.
So, from the UK, the gentleman was part of the new protocol.
I saw the name.
Yeah, and I would encourage you to discuss it. I mean, I think that the reason is that the health system in the UK is slightly different. The good thing is that everybody's covered, but somehow they have to make sure the resources are there for everyone. And I think it's a question of money, whether they're able to pay for that. But we recommend testing as early as possible. If there's LFS in a family, a baby is born, it should be tested right away. And then screening should be tested done early, because even in young children, the first cancers can occur. So definitely from the recommendations from the researchers sitting here would be to test, but it could be that the system in England is just different. It's a good system because everybody is insured, which is not, for example, in other countries, but I think it's a question of money. I would encourage you to contact this Garrett, who's also part of that our recommendation.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Any final remarks? Oh, in the back, yes. I have a microphone. Okay.
Dr. Joshua. I don't speak English. Dr. Maria Isabel is famous and lovely in Brazil.
Yes, and in the US too.
Agora pode falar inglês. O senhor também.
She just wants to make sure that you know that besides you said she's very famous in Brazil, she's also very loved. Everybody loves her, and you're also very famous and loved in Brazil.
Well, that's very sweet of you. I would say everyone on this panel, in my mind, is famous and loved. And I think a nice way to end the panel is to say the most famous and the most loved are all of the youth who've come out for this conference. So thank you for that.